With the help of Hashem, we are learning Yoma Daf Chav Vav. We're going to continue today with the Mishnah on top of the Amid that speaks about the Payas Hashlishi, the third lottery, and the fourth daily lottery. Until now, we learned about the first Payas that was instituted after the terrible occurrences that happened when it came to determining which coin will do the Trumas Hadeshen. We also learned in Abraisa, and we'll repeat this today, that once they instituted the first pious to be the one to determine who will remove the Trumas Hadeshen, there were other things that year did, including the preparing of the Mizbeach, which means preparing the Maracha, etc., as we'll go into details more right now. Then we learned yesterday about the second pious, and the second pious involved the morning Talmud, beginning with the Shechita, like we said, with the Zrika, with the clearing off of the inner golden altar, with the clearing off of the Mizbeach, those 4 steps, and then 9 steps regarding bringing up the Eivarim of the Talmud to the altar. And we spoke out that they didn't bring it up and throw it on the fire. We spoke about the 9 kohanim bringing up the different parts of the limbs and then of the intestines, etc., they brought it up to the lower part of the ramp. They actually put it down on the ramp. Some pratim I learned in Talmud, not over here. Then they went into a place designated for their Tefilla. They said the Shema, they said Shemona Esrei, etc. And we're going to continue today with the third pious, which will be the pious for the Ketores. And the fourth pious will be bringing up the limbs that were already on the ramp all the way to the top. And Larashi, all the way to the top means not only to the top of the altar, but throwing it on the Mizbeach. Now we're going to learn a little bit about the uniqueness of the Ketores. We already spoke out. Why was it Chadashim L'Ketoros that had brought about a school of Farashirus? We're going to learn in the Gemara about exactly which Kohanim did the Talmud Shel Bein Ha'arbayim. That's something that will have to be clarified. We're going to have the story of the Tzeduki on Amid Beis that did not accept the Torah Shebal Peh, as they don't. And therefore, they did not believe that there is a mitzvah to do Nisuch HaMayim. The Nisuch HaMayim is water that's poured in a unique bowl on the top corner of the Mizbeach. At the same time that the Nisuch HaYayin is done during the Korban Tamid, there was, in addition to the Nisuch HaYayin, the pouring of waters, and the Tzeduki poured the waters, not in the bowl that went into the cavity, that went into the Shittin, but he poured it on the floor of the Mizbeach, and how people use their Esrogim to teach them a lesson. And on the end of Chavav Amid Beis, we're going to learn that when we spoke about the 9 Kohanim involved in bringing up the Talmud of the morning, that's only because the morning Talmud was made out of a lamb, a kesed or a kaves. But whenever a oila was brought from a larger animal type, so you have an ayol is also from the same lamb family, but it's an adult lamb. It's a ram. And again, just to remember that a young kevesh is dafke within the first year. When an animal turns 13 months, that animal may b'chlal not be brought. And when it becomes 14 months, that means when it's already a full month in its second year, until the end of the second year, that is when the animal is called an ayol, a ram. There was certain, let's say, a korban musaf has to be brought from an ayol. Sometimes you brought an oila out of a par. And the larger the animal, the more the kohanim were needed to bring it up onto the Mizbeach. And the Mishnah at the end is going to speak about what happens when a yachid brings a korban oila, which is a typical offering korban of a yachid. We're going to learn about, it's not clear whether there was a lottery at all, but we will learn clearly that there are huge differences between the bringing up of a korban yachid versus the bringing up of a korban sibur, and many, many more details. Let us start on Daf Chavav Amid Aleph, right, 3 lines from the top of the Amid by the Mishnah. Baruch atah Adino Eloheinu melech ha'olam shahar kol nivra dvarim. The end of Chav Beis, the Mishnah writes that there were 4 payasais every day. So as we spoke out on the intro, the first payas was Trumas Hadeshen and others, Chusim. Second payas was from the Shechita of the Talmud Shel Shachar to determine who will do that, the Shechita, the Zrika, and the bringing up of the other parts. And now says the Mishnah, Payas Ashlishi, the third lottery. So before they would gather the Kohanim, they would make an announcement. to make it clear who may not join the lottery. And what did they announce? Chadoshim lakatoides. Only those who are new meaning, like Rashi says, they were never yet zoicha to offer the katoides. They should be the ones that bo'u v'hafisu come gather to cast the lot. Only they were allowed to enter the circle. And v'haravi. Now, when it came to the fourth time that they made a payos, and what we learned, it wasn't done one after the other. They wanted to add excitement. The Beis Elikim, Nahalach Beragesh. It was at different times. What was that? So they gave an intro, Chadashim im Yeshanim, because since they excluded the Yeshanim for the Ketaidas, to make it clear that everyone is invited to join, so they announced Chadashim im Yeshanim. And what's the fourth payas? Mi ma le'evadim min hakevesh la mizbeach. Who will bring up the evadim from the ramp all the way to the top of the mizbeach? There are two very important arguments amongst the Rishonim. Number one, and we're going to learn Shitas Rashi, that interestingly, here there was only one kohen. There are other Rishonim that hold, like the Tosfos Yeshanim, that just like you had the 9 kohanim that brought up parts of the carbon to the lower part of the ramp, here also you had the same number of kohanim bringing up the carbon now, like we have in the picture, from the ramp to the top of the altar. But anyways, we're going to follow Shitas Rashi, that the final step of the bringing up of all of these animal parts were done by one kohen. Another very important machlekes rishonim, and let's go again with Shitas Rashi, even though the Mishnah says la mizbeach is mashma, because you're on the ramp, you bring it just to the altar. But Rashi understands la mizbeach means la mizbeach and into the fire. Other Rishonim hold no, that there was actually someone else that would take it, that would already be standing on top of the mizbeach, and he would receive it from the kohen bringing it up, and he would throw it on top of the marochi gedolah. But anyways, we're going to follow Shitas Rashi, that the fourth payas was mamish for one kohen, and not only did he bring it up part by part, but he brought it up and he threw it in the fire. Okay. The Gemara is going to begin focusing on this Chadoshim Lakatoides. Says the Gemara Tana, we learned that indeed, Ma'olam Leishana Adam Ba, no one ever offered the incense more than once. And my Tama, what's the reason for that? Why did we not allow a repeat? Amar Rabbi Chanina Mipnei Shema Aseres, because it made the one who offered it wealthy. And therefore what? And therefore it's not fair to offer this opportunity that has such a great segula to the same person 2 times before another never got it even once. And Omar laid up Papala Abaye to Abaye, what's the source of it? My Tama. In other words, Mino Hanamili, Ilay Mishum Dechsif. And we're quoting here Psukim that we have in the Zois Abracha. The Pasuk writes that Yoiru Mishpatecha li Yaakov V'Seirascha li Yisrael. And the Pasuk continues. Now the Gemara is quoting Yosimu Kitoides Ba'apecha, that they placed, they meaning, listen guys, this Psukim is written for Bechlal Shevet Levi, but including, obviously we're speaking specifically for the Kohanim in that Shevet, that they placed the Kitoides Ba'apecha. Ba'apecha means in your presence, or Ba'apecha means in front of you. And it says in the next Pasuk, now really the Pasuk doesn't end there. It says Yosimu Kitoides Ba'apecha, who remembers, and then it says V'cholil al Mizbechecha. And they bring karbanis that are fully burnt, right, on your mizbech, which actually means the oila. The Gemara now is skipping the ending of the pasuk. We are making a bridge from the words Yasimu Katoidas Ba'apecha, and then we're going straight to the next pasuk, that Barech Hashem Cheli, that may Hashem bless his chel. His chel here means his resources, his wealth. So we're teaching that Barech Hashem Cheli is specifically for the one that will be Yosimu Katoidas Ba'apecha. So asks the Gemara, one second, open up a Chumash, and between the words Yosimu Katoidas Ba'apecha and the next pasuk Barech Hashem Chelo, you have the words V'cholil al Mizbechecha. So why don't we say Punkt Fakert, say that Ubarech Hashem Chelo goes for those people who offer an oil. Iyachi oila namak says V'cholil al Mizbechecha. So the answer is based on a premise that Barech Hashem Chelo does not go to both. It goes either to the Yasimu Ketoidas Ba'apecha or to the V'cholil al Mizbechecha. And if you have to choose which one does it go for, you have to use the logic that the oila shchicha. Because guys, don't forget that an oila, it's not only that the daily tamid, morning and afternoon was an oila. Throughout the entire day, people brought a carbon oila. The ketreidus is much less frequent. It's loy shchicha. It's only brought twice a day. And Rashi says, umistaber, I'm reading Rashi, that the chik siv oishir, that when God is giving wealth, adeloy shchicha, because the imke nimtzu hakoy lashirim, everyone will become wealthy. And therefore what? And therefore, if everyone is wealthy, you're no longer wealthy. How do you determine wealth? Really, the Mishnah says, but if we are determining wealth in a very external way of whoever has, so to say, more, it has to be more than the other. If everyone has the same amount of money, then you can't say that this person is wealthy. Okay, weiter. Amar Rav. Now that we quoted these psukim, so Rav says something very interesting. That loy mashkachas surba merabanan. You will not find a young Torah scholar. Many people understand that the young means under 40. So you will never find a young Torah scholar that's already the moide, that is already a bona fide poisik, a halachic decisor. It's not going to happen. Only Ella, either that he comes from the tribe of Levi or he comes from the tribe of Yisachar. Now, obviously, you have many tzurim rabbanans that are extremely learned when they're very young, but for them to be zoicha, to have the position of a moira hoira'ah, of a halachic poisik, it's either going to be from Levi or from Yisachar. And why? That's the link. Levi, because it says indeed in this pasuk that God told the Leviim, Moshe Rabbeinu blessed the Leviim, yoiru mishpatech Yaakov, that the Leviim should be the ones that should yoiru. Yoiru doesn't only mean to teach, that's the literal meaning, but yoiru here also means to pasken halachas to the Yidden, to Yaakov, Bnei Yaakov. And Yisachar, as it says, that Yisachar were yoidei bina leitim. They were the ones that had understanding of the times. That actually specifically means that they were the ones that chap more than the others the movements of the heavenly bodies, which will help them determine how to make a calendar. That's a unique type of grasp of understanding of bina. Bina lo'itim, the understanding of the times. But then it says, Vaiter lo das ma yasel Yisrael, that their unique gift of bina helped them determine how Yidden should behave to pasken halachis. I frag the Gemara of good ve'ema Yehuda nami. If you find a young Surah Midrash means a young Talmud Chacham, maybe he comes from the tribe of Yehuda. He's a Jew from Judah. The Chsiv, as it says, Yehuda is mechaykiki. Yehuda are the lawgivers, paskening halachis. So the Gemara says no. That asuke shmaitza aliba de ilchasa koamina. A lawgiver is one thing, one level. Asuke shmaitza aliba de ilchasa means that when you're learning a sugya and you have different opinions, you have opposing opinions, to have the koyach, to be certain, sometimes that the das yachid, sometimes the poisik is going against the majority. That's a unique type of gift, and again, that's granted to every yid that learns once you are 40 or older. But to have someone that young, under 40, having that koyach, that must be, that's a special bracha that God gave, either from Levi or from Yisachar. B'chlal, here you see, like everything else. On one hand, we say Yagato Matzasa Tamen. In other words, or in the opposite, that Lo Yagati Umatzasi Al Tamen. Of course, everyone has to make an effort. But when Yidden make an effort, the results of the effort, that God gives the results. And and there's a special gift, especially when it comes to La'asuka Shemaita Liba de Hilchasa, given over to the tribe of the Levium, which obviously also include the Kehanim, and to the Bnei Yisachar. Okay, coming back now to our sugya, what's amazing is that we learned about the four payoses. The last payos was the conclusion of burning the Tamid Shel Shachar. Now, my friends, hold on. That's all? I get it that during the day, between the morning Tamid and the afternoon Tamid, people brought their own personal karbanis. But what happens to the whole Tamid Shel Bein Ha'arbayim? And by the way, that includes the afternoon Ketairis. So don't tell me there was another payos. It's going to be complicated because then there's more than 4 payoses. That's the issue we're going to have to address. So first of all, says Rabbi Yechanan, indeed, since we went through all the 4 payoses, and that's it. So it must be that ein mefaisen al tamid shel bein ha'arbayim. We don't make another lottery to determine which kohen or which kohanim will be zoicha in the afternoon tamid. But who does it? Ela kohen shezocha boy b'shachris. Whichever part of the particular service, the shoichet, the zoidik, every part, zoicha boy arvis. That will be the same kohen. Now that works. Hold on, says the Gemara and Rabbi Yechanan, very nice. You explain why there's only 4 and not 5, but let's learn a brayso, meisvei. And listen to the nusach of the brayso. It says, Kishem shema faisam shachris, just like they made a piyus for shachris, meaning for the tamid shel shachris, kach mefaisim bein ho'arbayim. Quite clear, huh? What does he do with that? So the Gemara answers that Rabbi Yechanan will explain it to you. Kitan yahahi b'ktoiris. Now, guys, we still have a problem. The problem is, and the Gemara is not addressing yet, because Rabbi Yechanan did not verbally address the 4 payosis. Rabbi Yechanan just made a statement. So first of all, the Brayso doesn't contradict me. Rabbi Yechanan was only speaking about the Talmud Shel Bein Harbaim. He stands his ground. There was no new piyus for the Talmud Shel Bein Harbaim. The Brayso says that they made one in the afternoon. Oh, that was for the Ketores. Now what? Leave the question in the side of your mind. Hold on. If that's the case, why isn't this 5 lotteries? We'll address that in a moment. But at least this Brayso is not speaking about Tamid of the afternoon, and Rabbi Yechanan was speaking about the afternoon Tamid. The Gemara says no. V'atanya it says kishem shemafisim loy. Now, guys, we're going to focus on the masculine, feminine. Oyla is masculine. Ktoiris is in the feminine. So how can you say that the Brayso is referring to the Ktoiris when there is another Brayso that says kishem shemafisim loy? For it in the masculine, that l'chayr is referring to the oila, shachris, to the tamid. Kach mefaisim loy, to the tamid, to the oila arvis. So hevaita rakasha and Rabbi Yechanan. So the counter, you have to change the verb. That's how strong the question is. The only way out is to say that no, the word got corrupted. It was not in the masculine, it's in the feminine. The Brayso is saying law, back to Rabbi Yechanan. Okay, Ketayres, there was another one. Laws, Lashon Akeva. There was another one just for the afternoon Ketayres, which also makes sense because Chadashim, that's what we said. Chadashim leketayres. You don't want to give it to the same coin twice. Yeah, the daily money measure that was offered as Ketayres was divided in half in the morning, half in the afternoon. Give it to another coin. And the Brayso is referring to law. Gemara says, no, you can't corrupt this Brayso. I'll tell you why. Because it says in another Brayso, V'hotanya, Kishem shemafisim loy shachres, kach mafaisim loy arvis. The Brayso continues, Ucheshem shemafaisim lo shachres, kach mafaisim lo arvis. Here, fakert, here the Brayso is clearly speaking sai both on the Talmud Shel Shachar and on the Talmud Shel Bein Arbaim Lamed Vav, and the Brayso is speaking about the Ketayres. Now, by the way, if we're going to now go back to the question of the Mishnah says 4, how many payasas are we up to right now? Now the question is even stronger. Right now there's 6. There's 2 more in the afternoon. Okay. And this answer will answer everything. So Amar Rab Shmuel bar Yitzchak, bar Rav Yitzchak. No, you're right. Okay. The Brayso clearly is speaking about making another lottery for the Talmud Shel Bein Harbaim. But you know when this is done? And Rabbi Yechanan was not speaking about the exception, only on Shabbos Kodesh. Why? Because the change of the guard was during Shabbos. So how can you say, which is what Rabbi Yechanan says, that the Kohanim that were Zoicha, Begoydel, for the morning, they were the ones that brought it for the afternoon. And by the way, let's go now back to the Ketayres, and the same thing with the Ketayres. Whoever was Zoicha, the third pious that we started today, in the morning, automatically the same one brought it in the afternoon. There's only one problem. On Shabbos, all of the Kohanim that were in the morning, they left. Their Mishmar ended. A new Mishmar came in. So for Shabbos, Kodesh, you have to make a new piyus. So Einachanamis, it doesn't bother me that just on Shabbos, there were actually now 6 payoses. Nishkan problem. There's normally, on a daily basis, you have 4 payoses. It fits perfectly. When did the Mishmar change? We're going to learn about this later. It was before Musaf. Before Musaf. That's... On a regular day was the morning, but let me just clarify. Rabbi Chen is just to say like this, that really the Mishmar was a group of Kohanim that came from a family that they were given the schus to work a whole week, from the middle of Shabbos to the next middle of Shabbos. In order for them not to overload, everyone wants to do carbon every day, so we made amongst ourselves, let's divide our Mishmar into 6 groups. mini groups. And every group is called a Beis Av. And every Beis Av worked for one day. Why 6? Week has 7 days, because on Shabbos Chodesh, everyone came back in. Clear? Good. So says the Gemara, answers the Gemara, the Braisa, indeed, and this goes to all of the Braisas, is B'Shabbos Askina. There was no Breira. There was no option. Hoyel u'mishmarois mischatchois. There's a new mishmar in the afternoon. So you can't tell the kohen who did the Talmud Shel Shachar, wow, you were even lucky through it to win the afternoon. He's not there. He's not allowed to do the avodah. But the Nakuda is, chap now, that's the way we're going to learn the Gemara, that this is even true to the Ketairas. Verstehst? In other words, indeed, there were only 4 payases. The problem is, Ulamai, the Salaka died in Mikara, before we had this clarification, and we had a few braisas, and it came out that what? Especially the last one, that there was another 2 lotteries made in the afternoon before the interpretation limiting it to Shabbos. So now Nefishiluhu Payasois. So hold on, that's a problem. The problem is now we have more than 4. How do they even understand it that way? Answers the Gemara, even according to the Havamina, Maisi Kula Mitzafri Asu. When did the Kohanim gather? They gather in the morning. And the Zachi Beishachre is Zachi Ba'arvis. The Zachi Beishachre is Zachi. The Zachi is Ba'arvis Zachi, which means, remember we learned yesterday the whole kasha, when we learned in the Mishnah that 13 Kohanim won, let's say there were 13 Kohanim connected to the second pious. So the Gemara asked the question on Daf Chafei, what exactly happened? Did they take off a hat 13 times? Remember? And did they count the number 13 separate times? Or no, they did it only once. They did it only once. And whichever one won the shchita, which is this maskana, automatically the one to the right won the zrika. The one to his right won the dishon mizbeach hapnimi. But according to the Havamina, according to the one side of the inquiry that they made for the Talmud Shel Shachar, 13 separate lotteries. So let me ask you a question. The Mishnah said there are only 4, but that never bothered us. Why did that not bother us? Because the 4 lotteries means, as we also pointed out, it was not done at mamish the same time. It was not done back to back. It was bebeis Eliakim nahalech beragish. There were 4 different times when lotteries were made. Now, if during one of those gatherings, more than one lottery was made, it's still considered one. It was a one time. So the Havamina was, they made a separate lottery, which afforded other Kohanim to have the opportunity to win the Ketairas. Other Kohanim to win the opportunity of the Talmud Shel Beinu Arbaim. Why is it not considered more than 4? Because it was done at the same time. That was the Havamina. Now, Rabbi Yochanan says that's not the case. But the Havamina was, Payasheni, what was Payasheni? People gathered. They gathered for the 13 chusim that we learned about yesterday. The Havamina is that they actually made then 2 separate lotteries. 2 separate lotteries, but at the same time. One for the morning, one for the afternoon. Whoever was there in the morning, good for you. Then they made another lottery at the same time. Since it was done at the same time, it's counted as one pious and Daf Chav Beis. 4 times they gathered. Now, the fact is that Rabbi Yochanan is saying, no, that's not the case. They did not make a new lottery for the Talmud Shel Beinu Arbaim. They did not make a new lottery for the Ketairas. The same one, that's the way we're learning Pshat in the Gemara, even though Ketairas is not mentioned clearly. The same one that was Zeicha in the morning was Zeicha for the afternoon. Gewaltig. Clear. Now the Gemara is referring back to the Mishnah. The Mishnah is speaking about the 4th time that they gathered. And the 4th lottery was, who was going to bring up the Eivarim to the top of the Mizbeach. These are the words of the Mishnah. Haravi, but they gave an intro. Chadashim im Yeshanim. They didn't want to scare people away. No, everyone now can come back into the circle. Says the Gemara, Upa, you should know that our mission is not like Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov. The Tanan, Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov Omer, the first white line, that Hamale Eivarim Lakevesh, whoever was Zoicha, let's call this in step number 1. Again, what's step number 1? That after they dismembered the limbs, now, as we learned yesterday with all of the different shitos, those animal parts were brought from the tables, from the pillars, from the area of the dismemberment. They brought it up until the ramp, on the ramp, but on the lower part of the ramp. And Taka, there was a break. And they went to daven. But Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov holds that same coin, which whatever part he brought up to the kevesh, now the same one brought it like kevesh to the top of the mizbeach, and again, and on the fire. Who malo oisem lamizbeach? Now, Chavre, so first of all, clearly, our Mishnah is not Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov. But let me just go back to the number. So if that was our Mishnah's fourth payos, don't think that Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov doesn't have a fourth payos. Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov has a fourth lottery, but that was for something else. Now, before we get to that, there might come mifligi. So Mar Sovar, our Mishnah holds, B'Rav Am Hadras Melech. And what does B'Rav Am Hadras Melech mean? Get more people involved. This will be something fundamental for the Mishnah we're going to learn today at the end of Chavav Amad Beis. B'Rav Am Hadras Melech. What's the counter to that? So why would Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov not allow other Kahanim to get involved? Why don't you make another payas? Umar Sovar, that's Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov. No, that since we are in Mokim, Shechinam, Lav, Oirach, Aretz, not proper, let's use the words, to give the impression that the job is too troublesome to finish. No, on one hand, you want to get more people involved. But on the other hand, from the other angle, I'm mamish in the presence of God. In the presence of God, we should become more zoris. In the presence of God, we should take a job and do it until the end. So he subscribes to that, and that value of not doing something that gives the appearance that the avodah is hard, that is even more important than B'Rava Hadras Melech. So now says Rava, and what's motivating Rava's statement is the four payosis. So we took out Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov, the fourth payos, but there was a fourth payos. So let me speak it up. We already mentioned it before. Now, by the third payos, we mentioned Ktoiris. We already learned the sheet of Rabbi Yehuda. What about the kohen that would bring the coals from the small maracha of the outer mizbeach inside the hechel, placing the coals that needed to be placed on top of the inner altar, upon which the Ketoides Yid put the Ketoides. So Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov will hold that there was a separate payas for the coals. And it wasn't even on at the same time. To make it, Bebeis Elikim, the Halach Beragish, even though it's connected to the Avodah of the Ketoides. So it's either one or the other, says the Gemara, Amarava Loi, Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov holds like Rabbi Yehuda. We already quoted Rabbi Yehuda before. Rabbi Yehuda holds that you did not make a separate payas for the coals. Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov holds you did, Gavaldik. So now there's a fourth one. But we also must say that the lawyer Rabbi Yehuda holds of Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov. Because, Chavre, if Rabbi Yehuda were to hold, Rabbi Yehuda clearly says that they did not make a lottery for the coals for the Ketoides. They did not do that. If Rabbi Yehuda would hold like Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov, that they also did not make a payas to bring the Evarim that were already on the kevish to the top and to the fire, then according to Rabbi Yehuda, there would only be three payoses. If Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov would hold like Rabbi Yehuda, that you don't make a payas for the coals as a separate payas, then according to Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov, there would only be three payoses. And the Gemara Rava wants to say, no one holds that on a daily basis there were three payoses. Everyone holds that there were four, maybe even five. Which we will see enough today that there was a Tana and a Braisa that holds that there was both. Notice he argues with both. There was a payas Evarim min hakevish lamizbeach. There was a payas for the machta that's going to give you 5 daily payoses. That doesn't bother us. But no one holds there were less than 4. Well, Rabbi Yehuda is Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov. It's the last line of the Amid because the imkain, if either of these two Tanoim would agree with the other, then batzru lohu payoses, then the number of the payoses would be little. Little means it would be less than 4, and no one holds less than 4. However, the Gemara Rava concludes, I'm not telling you that everyone agrees that there were 4 and not more. Everyone agrees that there were not less than 4. But the mashkachas tana, if you will end up finding a tana, even if it's not written so explicitly, but from inference you will realize that a tana subscribes the Tanei Chamesh, that there are 5 daily payoses that Chavav Amid Beis. That's fine. That's fine. It's going to fit. Because Hahu, that Tana will not hold like Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov, but yes, like our Mishnah, that there was a pious Evarim to the top of the altar. That Tana will also not hold like Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda says you don't make a pious for the machda. This Tana will hold, yes, you do make a separate pious for the coals that are needed upon which to put the ketoides. And if you take a hold not like Rabbi Eliezer, not like Rabbi Yehuda, you're going to end up with a total of 5 payasas. Okay, Islamish Geshmak. We're learning Chevra temple matters. Halachas of the Beis HaMikdash. Okay, now the Mishnah we're still speaking about a lamb, a tamid, but we're adding more. Because what we had yesterday was, I know the numbers changed for a reason. The number that we had yesterday was, Chevra, what was the Payasheni? The Mishnah said 13. The Mishnah said clear 13. But if you remember, the 13 are not mamish in the same group. There were the first 4 and then the other 9. The 4 was, again, the shoichet. We established that the shoichet is not the mekabel. That was yesterday. The second one was mizoidik, but really it meant who's going to be the mekabel, the moilech, and the zoidik, 2. Then we learned the coin next to him was zoicha b'dishun mizbeach hapnimi, and then mi medashin de menoira. And then the Mishnah said, okay, now let's go to the Talmud. It's now that we shechted it, we don't even mention flaying it. We don't even mention dismembering it. We will actually learn soon that there are those that hold it doesn't even have to be done by a kohen. The taking off the skin and the cutting it up into the right pieces. So let's not even, and there was zikr, no pious for that. The whole pious was to prevent machlokes, something that is not that chashuv as an avodah, did not demand a pious. We'll learn a lot of that in the later daf. But now the Mishnah says that no, it's not only 9, that there were certain times that connected to the second pious, there were more than 9. Now, really, it means more than 13. But the lashon of this Mishnah, we are ignoring the first 4. Of course, they always exist. We're going to focus only on from when they would take up the Eivarim, which didn't only include the Eivarim. Remember, there were 5 with the Eivarim. If you look in the Mishnah that we learned yesterday, the 6 was for the Kirbayim. Then we had the Soilis, and we had the Chavitin, and we had the Yain. Fine. The 9 from the Rosh and the Regel. The Rosh and the Regel was the first of the 9. So says our Mishnah, Tamid, Charev Betisha, which is exactly what we learned yesterday. So Rashi right away says, what do you mean Betisha? It's B'shloisha Asar. Yeah. This Mishnah is shelving the first 4. We're going to put it together in the Gemara. But we have 9. However, it wasn't only 9. Sometimes it was more than 9. Sometimes there were 10. We'll see when was it in 10. That means another coin was Zoicha. Sometimes even Ba'achad Asar, and the max was B'shnei Asar. But there is a minimum and a maximum. There were never less than 9. Again, 9 means 13, but we're ignoring the first 4. And there were never more than 12. And the Mishnah speaks it out. Ketzad, we're going from the lowest to the highest number. Atzmoi, meaning for the offering itself, you needed to have 9. Look inside the 4th line from the top of Amar Rashi. Atzmai b'chol yoim b'tisha. And the way Rashi breaks it down. Chamisha le'evarim. Now, what was the order? Remember yesterday we had, you can say 4 or even 5 opinions in the Tanoim of the Seder. Then the Echad, the 6th was likirbayim. Then the 7th was to bring up the soilus of the Tamid. And as we mentioned, even though the chavitin is not connected with the Tamid Shel Shachar, but we put together like and like, flour and flour. And then the 8th was the chavitim, and the final, the 9th, was the yid that brought up the wine. Right? Eventually, the wine is going to be poured on the southern western corner of the Mizbeach. There were really 2 bowls, not 1 bowl. One was for the yayin, the other was for the mayim, and that was the 9th one. So now back inside the Mishnah, but whenever it was Chag means Sukkot, guys were focusing on the Tamid Shel Shachar. So now what do we have? Biyad Echad, there's a 10th kohen. What does the 10th kohen bring up? The Tzolech Yishomayim. Halacha lo Moshe Sinai, that aside of the Nisu Chayayin, there was also the Nisu Chamayim. So who exactly brought it up? A kohen. And for that, you made a pious, there should not be a machlokes. Now, now says the Mishnah, Bein Harbayim. It's amazing. So even though the Mishnah never spoke about Bein Harbayim, I know Rabbi Yechanan spoke about it. We had the Havamina, we had the Maskana. But now we're saying, hold on, in the afternoon, whether it was the Havamina, a separate pious, but it was the same lamb, whether it was the same kohanim, but you needed to add more kohanim. Why do you need more kohanim in the afternoon than in the morning? Because what's b'achadaso? How do you get to 11? Who atzmai b'tisha? Like Rashi spoke out. From the Rosh and the Regel, from the Evarim until the Yayin, you have 9. Ushnayim biyadam shnei gezirei eitzim. There is a mitzvah to put on the ma'arocha gedola, on the pyre, to put wood, the minimum of 2 logs of wood. Now we're not, the Torah says, v'arach oleh hakoyin baboiker. So there were the 2 logs that were put in the morning. But who put the 2 logs in the morning? If you remember, we already mentioned that the Kitzur. The Braisa says that whoever was zoich in the Trumas Hadeshen, remember, he already made a whole seder on top of the Mizbeach. He organized the Ma'arachas. The one that was zoich in the Trumas Hadeshen in the morning, the first pious, was zoich in bringing up the Shnei Gizrei Eitzim. And by the way, a very important detail, the kohen that brought up the 2 logs in the morning was the same kohen, the Torah says so. One kohen brought up both logs. But that's only in the morning. There was a Trumas Hadeshen. In the afternoon, there's no Trumas Hadeshen. There is no reorganizing the top of the Mizbeach. In the afternoon, there was a lottery for the Kohen that's going to bring up the 2 logs. But you know what? In the afternoon, Dafke, it wasn't one Kohen that brought it up. It wasn't like in the morning. In the afternoon, one Kohen brought up 1 log, one Kohen brought up another log. So Haston 9, and you have another 2 Kohanim. And B'Shabbos. So now he says, Ba'achad Asar, you also have 11. How do you have 11? Again, Hu Atzmai B'Tisha. Ushnayim B'Yodim, this is in the morning. The Shnei Gizrei Eitzim is from the one that went through Masadesha. But Ushnei B'Yodam, Shnei Bazichi Levaina, Shalechem Apanim. Gavaldik. So the Lechem Apanim had two shelves, had 2 racks, 6 and 6. On each rack, there was that spoon of Levaina that would sit on the shulchan. And on Shabbos Kodesh, connected to the morning avodah, what was considered the kemitza of each rack of the 6 lechem apanim breads was the bringing up on the mizbech the entire Levaina that was in the baziach. 1 and 1, Baited 11. Now says the Mishnah, where do you have 12? When was the max that there were 12 kohanim? Really 12, we already learned, means 16. Because it was a side of the first 4. Ubishabbos shebetoich hachag. Oh, put it all together. What do you have chag? Unique. You have the tzoloi chishol mayim. What do you have in the morning of Shabbos? The 2 bazichen. Hast du gut. So hast du 12. 2 and 2. The 9, right? You have 9. You have the 10th, which is the one who brings up the mayim, not to 1 and 2, and then biyad echot tzoloi chishol mayim. And it goes without saying, and another 2 for the lechem aponim, for the bazichim of the lechem aponim. That's the 12. So says the Gemara, Amar Rabbi Abba, or other people say that the following statement was made by Rami Bar Chama, or it was made by Rabbi Yechanan. Ein menaschin mayim b'chag elo b'tamid shel shachar. That during Sukkot, yes, halacha l'Moshe Sinai, you bring up mayim aside, on top of, in addition to the yayin, that's only brought in the morning, and mimai, from our Mishnah, because since it says ubishabbos shebetoich hachag biyad echad tzoloi chishol mayim, right? That's the only case of 12. That's the only case of 12. The Mishnah didn't give another case. Says the Gemara, I have another case of 12. Never 13. What will be the other case of 12? Not on Shabbos. Every day, guys. Every day in the afternoon, you automatically have 12. Why do you automatically have 12? Because you have the 2. You have the 2 Gizrei Eitzim. Now the 2 Gizrei Eitzim, the Mishnah says, okay, 9 and 2 is 11, not 12. But if during Sukkot, in the afternoon, aside of the 9 Hu Atzmai, aside of every day in the afternoon, 2 kohanim, 1 for each log of wood, you also have the Nisu Chamayim, then every day Sukkot, in the afternoon, there will be 12 kohanim. Then the Mishnah wouldn't have said that you only have a case of 12 kohanim on Shabbos. No, it can be every day during Sukkot. The fact the Mishnah didn't mention it, the Mishnah, we know that there's always exceptions, but this is too big of an exception. You don't mention something that's so rare once, Shabbos, When it's every single day, is that ayah that there was never nisuch hamayim sukkos in the afternoon, and the Gemara is going to substantiate it. Amar Ravashi, afano namitanino. He's proving it from a Mishnah in Sukkah. The Mishnah says that lam naseich oimer loy, that the person who was zoich in the nisuch hamayim, he would be told the way he should pour the water is hagba yodecha, raise your hands while you're pouring. Guys, when someone is on a very tall platform, right, and you look up, you will see his head, but it will be difficult to see the lower parts of his body because he's like the height of the platform becomes like a mechitza that's mafsik. And since the Kohanim wanted to make sure that the one who's pouring the water is pouring it inside the bowl, and not as the story once happened that a tzadduki went up there and he poured it on the ground of the altar, because he didn't accept the Torah Shabbat Peh, so they would tell him Hagba Yodech. And furthermore, Shapam Echad, there was once a time that Niseich al Gabaraglav, that this tzadduki poured it on his feet. Now some people realized what he did, and Uragamu Kalo Am Be'esrogim, they pelted him with their esrogim. In other words, since it happened once, we were always afraid that we might have a tzadduki, so we would tell him Hagba Yodecha. Now there's a question here. The question is, why does the Mishnah have to write that they pelted him with esrogim? There's everything has another reason. Milsa Gavurcha, and that's to tell you that this happened dafka in the morning. Only the morning is a time where there's the mitzvah for us to take the lulav and esrog. Now, of course, we know from Mitzrayim that if a yid nebach didn't do it in the morning, you can do it even in the afternoon. You can do it during the day. But that's not the time to take the esrog. The time to take the lulav and the esrog is in the morning, as soon as possible. Right? As soon as possible. So Shema Minom, that's the secondary limud, that the Nisuch Hamayim was only done bisman she'esrogeyim biyadeyim. Gewaldig. Says the Gemara, Tanya, Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai Oimer. Menayin l'tamid shel bein ha'armayim. Sheton shnei gizrei eitzim shnei kohanim. Now this is something that the Mishnah said. But again, let's go back. It's good to remember this. Mashiach is coming. I know we're not the kohanim, but it's good to have all the yidden. At least we should be zeicha to learn the dinim. So not only was the morning different in the afternoon, because the one who was zacha to bring the shnei gizrei eitzim in the morning, right? He was connected to the Trumas Hadeshen Payas, not connected to the Payas Hasheni. So that alone differentiates the morning and the afternoon. But we're going to focus on the fact that the kohen, that Taka needed to put on the Ma'arocha at least Shnei Gizrei Eitzim, it was one kohen for both logs of wood. And if you remember in Shkolim, we already spoke out. It's not a log. Don't think about something circular. It was like a square, not like it was a square, an amma by an amma. And regarding the thickness, there's a machlekes tanoim. And we say that it was very thin. It was like an etzba. It was mamash like a tile that people put lahavdol on their floor. Okay, so in the morning, one kohen brought up both gizrei eitzim. But in the afternoon, as we have in our Mishnah, how do you go from 9 to 11? Because there were two kohanim, meaning one kohen per log, not one kohen which kept two. What's the source of that? Says Rab Shimon Shenemar, that in the Chumash Vayikra, when we are speaking about the bringing up of the Shnei Gizrei Eitzim, even though the psukim are psukim of the morning Talmud, now you need to have a Rashbi. But since the Torah, as we'll see, exchanges its expression, there are two psukim. And in one of them, we don't use the words ubiyed, which would be the prior expression used for bringing up the logs, to burn the wood. Here it says, va'archu eitzim, right? They, woods, everything is b'lashon abim, all right? Eitzim, and the whole va'archu eitzim is not needed, because the Torah already mentioned, like we said, that wood should be brought up baboiker. We already have that ubiyed akoyin eitzim baboiker. So the second pasuk va'archu eitzim is not needed for the morning tamid. So we use one of the lemudim shatoin and the dreshes, which is not part of the yud gimel midos, but it's one of the midos. There are many more than the yud gimel midos, and that is im einoi inyan l'tamid shel shachar. Because we don't need it, because the Torah already says ubiyed oleh hakoyin eitzim babayker. Now, guys, look that on ubir aleha hakoyin, not hakoyhanim. Clear. The morning, it's taka eitzim, it's taka 2, but it's brought up by one koyin. So this other pasuk va'orchu eitzim, they is lashon abim, not one koyin, 2 koyanim. So va'orach aleha is not needed. And therefore, we apply it. That's the main ingen to neil ingen. You have to mamish be a rashbi. Like, how do you know what to put it for? Must be to neil ingen tomash obein harbaim. And since it's written in the plural, not only eitzim in the plural that we have in the morning, but va'archu, not ubir hakoyin, va'archu pashit. So there's 2 koyanim. So that's the end of the Rashbi. So asks the Gemara, hold on. The Ema, at the end of the day, both of these psukim are written regarding the Talmud Shel Shachar. It's always a stretch to go Eina Inyan Tanela Inyan. So the Ema, why don't you say Talmud Shel Shachar? Navos then, maybe the Torah wants that every morning, guys, there should be 4 logs of wood. 4 logs of wood. 2 brought up by 1 kohen. V'amar Achmana Avid bring up 2 by 1. You're right. And then in the morning, another 2, a total of 3 kohanim and 4 logs of wood, all in the morning. And then do it again. Right? Answers the Gemara, no, that can't be because Imkain, the Torah would have used the same word. Imkain ubir, not ubir va'arach. So the Gemara says, no, because of Rahman ubir, have a mina chadin trei loy. No. If the Torah would have said ubir twice, then yeah, I would have thought, again, 2 kohanim. They bring up a total of 4 logs, but only 2 kohanim. 1 brings up 2, and another 1 brings up 2. And that's why, this is all part of the question, that's why the Navat Chad and Navat Trei. 1 brings up 1 brings up 2. But we wouldn't have known that the second bringing up of the woods have to be brought up by 2 people. But maybe again, it all goes for the morning. So the Gemara says, no, I get it that the Torah would have to write a Lashon Abim for the second wood placing. But use the same word if it's all in the morning. Imkain, either name akra ubiyad ubiyaru, and that would have been enough. Ubiyad ubiyaru would have been clear. The first 2 are brought up by 1 kohen. The other 2 in the morning are brought up by 2 kohanim, or va'arach va'archu. But my ubiyad va'archu. Not only a shinoi from Lashon Yachid, which is the morning, to a Lashon Abim, 1 kohen versus 2 kohanim, but Shema Mina, like Rashim Bar Yerchoi, Kid Kalmarinen, this limud of him, Einoi Ingen Teneole Ingen. The Va'arach Halel is for the afternoon, and the afternoon placement of the woods were dafka done by 2 kohanim, as it says in our Mishnah, and that's the source. So therefore, you went from 9 to 11. The 9 plus 2 kohanim, 1 for 1 wood, 1 for the other wood. Says the Gemara, Tani Rabbi Chia. Now Rabbi Chia, unlike Rabbeinu HaKadosh, that for some reason in our Mishnah changed the 13 back to 9. Because he wasn't even focusing in our Mishnah, B'Negeya, the first 4. But there were Taka 13. So Rabbi Chia learned the Braisa similar. He says sometimes pious, sometimes Yud Gimel, right? And that's the Yud Gimel. Because my friends, 9 and 4 is 13. That's Taka what we had in the prior Mishnah. And he was learning the same din in his Lashon. Our Mishnah said 9, 10, 11, 12. So let's go start 13, sometimes 14, sometimes 15, sometimes 16. Now we got a problem. Problem is that Ve'hatanya Yud Zayin. Now we'll appreciate what we learned the top line in the Amid. It says Yud Zayin. There are times that it is more, not like Pachos v'lo Yoser. Indeed, says the Gemara, Hahi goes to the Tani Rabbi Chia, not to the Yud Zayin. Hahi also goes to our Mishnah. Is the Loi K'Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov, Elul K'Rabbi Yehuda. Like we spoke out at the end of right before the new Mishnah. In other words, if you hold that there was either, let's go not like Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov. What does Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov hold? Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov holds that you don't even make a pious reviv to put the Ivarim on the ramp. But if you hold that you make another pious, another client to bring the Ivarim from the ramp on top, and Chevre, and there was another, so what are you going to have? So you're going to have a 17th one. You're going to have a 17th one. In other words, if you don't subscribe that there was a special pious for the Evarim to the top, Now, what did we learn until now? That if you don't subscribe to that, what did Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov say? The same kohanim that won to bring it up for the first part, they were the same ones that brought it up again. But let's go with another Tana that's not our Mishnah, that they will hold that no, that there was another Yid that was part of the Payis Hasheni. It was part of the Payis Hasheni. So you got the 9 plus the 10th every time was someone connected to that Payis that brought it to the top of the Mizbech on the Haktorah. 1 second. So according to that, for what did you make the fourth lottery? The fourth lottery is not like Rabbi Yehuda. The fourth lottery will be for the coals, for the Ketaitis. You have a fourth lottery. Our Mishnah holds that the final step was a second Payis, separate Payis. But the Tana that says 17 does not subscribe to that separate Payis. There's going to be 4 Payoses because I hold like Rabbi Yehuda. It's perfect. So therefore, there was always not 13, there was always 14. He begins with 14. And then you have, like we mentioned in our Mishnah, so then it was 14, 15, 16, 17. Like Brachos v'lo yoser. We have time, let's go on to the next Mishnah. So Atkan, let's go back to the 9. And really the 9, let's focus on the 6. The 6 is like Rashi says. I'll tell you better, let's focus on the 5. Because from the bringing up the limbs, let's exclude the intestines for a second. The limbs itself, with the all machloikesin of how many orders, what was the say that there were 5 people. 5 people because the lamb, begashmi, is smaller. It doesn't weigh as much. Let's go back to the concept of Berav Am Hadras Melech. Let's follow our Mishnah, Lishitos of the Mishnah, that you made another Payis, right, to get yet another Yid, all about the Rav Am, all right? And that's why our Mishnah doesn't hold like Eliezer ben Yaakov. So let's use the Berav Am Hadras Melech. What happens if the Korban Oila, guys, we're just speaking about a Korban Oila. I want to make that clear because by other Korbanos, like the flanks, many parts that we learned were burnt, were takamat burnt. They were eaten by the Kahanim. And by Koche Kalam, they were eaten by the Ba'alim as well. We're learning all about an Oila. Now, an Oila is not only Talmud Shel Shachar. The Talmud Shel Shachar is a lamb. But you have, for example, an Oila of Musaf, a communal Oila, many communal Oilas. Some of them dafka were an ayol. Some of them dafka were a par. So says our Mishnah that if ayol, then karei va'achadasar. And again, guys, we are ignoring the first 4 steps. We're going to focus simply from the Evarim onwards. So not 9, there's 11. Now, what are the 11? The Mishnah counts habasar v'chamisha. That's why I like the chamisha is the same. That's why Rashi also separated them, because the kirbayim, we'll see, that was where it began to change. Oh, so now up to 5. The hakirbayim and the soilis and the yayin were brought. Each one of these 3 were not brought up by one. Like by the lamb, it was 1 yid, 1 kohen brought up the intestines. Here 2. Don't forget that by an ayol, the amounts of the soilus and the amounts of the yayin, we spoke this out last in Shkolim, were larger. You go from 1/4 of a hin to 1/3 of a hin. And they divided it amongst 2 separate kohanim. Not because they couldn't carry that difference, but again, let's go with the concept of Berav Am Hadras Melech. So these 3 had 2 each, so that's 6. 6 and 5, my friends, is 11. Then the Mishnah says, by a par, you went to 24 kohanim. Wow. So let's go. So Harash Haregel, which is the first, were not brought up by the same person. Faket, not only was it not brought up by 1, but the first category of Roish and right hind leg brought up by 3. How do you have that? Harosh be'echad, v'regel b'shnayim. Can you imagine 1 regel being carried by 2 people? Now, we did not dismember that regel into 2. Because, there's Evarim, and then you have Evrei Evarim. So they knew that a leg you don't cut into pieces. Good. Now, the next group was ha'oiketz v'haregel. So again, ha'oiketz v'haregel by the lamb was 1 person. Here, imagine, 4. Ha'oiketz by 2 kohanim, and the regel by 2 kohanim. So where are we up to, guys? 7. Let's go weiter. Hechaza v'hagera. By the lamb, it was carried up by 1. So let's see over here. The chaza was 1, and the gera, see, the gera isn't only the neck. That's why we spoke out yesterday. The gera meant all the front part. Even the inner parts. It included the trachea, it includes the lungs, it includes the heart. It's a lot. It was whatever 3. So that's weiter 4. 1 and 3 is 4. 7 and 4 is 11. Up to 11. 11 kohanim. Let's go weiter. Shtei yodayim v'shnayim. At least 1 each. Interesting. 1 each. So where are we up to, guys? We're up to 13. Shtei defanois Bishtayim. So we're up to 15. Just imagine, guys, a flank weighs so much. So it wasn't just about weight, because if there can be one coin that can carry a doifen, a one coin can carry a leg. It's clear, not about the comfortability of the weight. It's about the Rav Amadra smell. So up to 15. And now, v'hakirbayim, v'hasoilas, v'hayayin, a pot had even larger amounts of flour, the largest. It had a chatzi yahin of yain, chatzi yahin of shemen, so b'shloisha shloisha. So if you have 15, and now these final three each, so that's 9, 15 and 9 is 24. Says the Mishnah, everything that we learned until now, going back to the Talmud, that there was a specific number of kahanim, and we used the lottery. That's only by korbanos sibur. Avol b'korban yachid imrotz lahakriv makriv. Now, guys, there's a whole gewaldige machloekes. What does that mean? The taich is whichever coin wanted to bring it can bring it, right? What does Rashi write? Haroitz lahakriv, haroitz v'imrotz lahakriv coin. Look inside the last line in the Amid. Yachid es hakoil ubaloy payas. That if there's a korban yachid and one coin wants to do the whole thing, my friends, then he did it without a lottery. Now, how did we determine who should be the coin? Let's not forget the beginning of the Sol Sugya, that if you don't make a seder that everyone accepts, then there can be an argument, and the argument led to terrible things. So first of all, many Rishonim say that when you bring a korban, when I bring a korban yachid, even though that a coin has to do the avodah, the owner has the right to gift the avodah to a specific coin. And they say that if the owner did not determine which coin should do it, then in a chanama you would make a pious. Another detail, if the owner did not determine which coin should do it, then it wasn't that they made a lottery only to determine which coin should get it. No, then they would give it to many kohanim. The same thing, it would be a total of 13. That's what Rashi is trying to say, that there was the option of giving it to only one kohen. If you only gave it to one kohen, then you didn't do the pious. But there was such an option. And then the Mishnah concludes, this is the last line of the Mishnah, that regarding all of the korbanos, whether it's yachid, whether it's tzibur, whether it's a lamb, whether it's a ram, whether it's an ox, have shaitan v'nituchan, because we went from the shchita to the zrika, and all of a sudden we begin speaking about who brought it up on the mizbeach. So you don't do shchita and zrika and you bring it up. There are 2 steps, and that is the flaying, and that is the dismemberment. So the Mishnah didn't mention it. So says the Gemara, have shaitan and ituchan, they're the same. Say what? The last line in Rashi. Shall tzibur v'shal yachid shaven lihiyois kishedim bizar. They're the same, that it didn't even have to be done by a kohen. And therefore, even when it was done by a kohen, you didn't have to make a payos. And that's going to be a gavaldik. We're going to continue in the next daf. Hold on. If something that can be done by a zor doesn't need to have a lottery, so let me ask you, why was the shoichet determined by a lottery? That's going to be a big question. But we're going to see now, I'm going to have to define the criterion. What is avoida? Avoida enough? You need to have a lottery. All of that, God willing, to be continued. And let me tell you, that kachim is very difficult. The beauty about Yoma, it's mamash easy Gemara, but there is the geschmack. Once you get into the Beis Hamikdash, it's pashut beautiful. It's going through the center of the day, every single step.
Thank you, Rabbi.